Hi, everybody. My name is Deborah Peters, and welcome back to the Deborah Peters Show. I'm absolutely delighted to have you join me today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for subscribing, hitting that like button. You know, that is really what boosts the channel. And making any comments that you would like. You can ask questions. If you're on Facebook and LinkedIn, you can send through questions live and we can answer them for you today. So thanks for being here. I really am appreciative. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving and you're looking forward to the end of the year. It's an exciting time. Lots of big changes coming, which is why I created this show. I wanted a show that would address some of the tricky and difficult conversations that a lot of people avoid having. And the main part of that is around consciousness and our self-awareness. Because self-awareness is really the key to everything. You know, when you're not being triggered, when you're not being wondering like, why is this happening? You know, when you really can be self-aware, then you can change your whole life and you can change your relationships. And it's just so powerful. So it's all about consciousness and living your life on the leading edge of thought. And with that said, I have a great guest today. And, you know, cancer is a really hot topic. I could have a lot to say about that, but we'll save that for the show. And, you know, one of the big things is over 1,700 people die every single day in America from cancer. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, just look at the food supply for one thing. But I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole before I introduce my guest because she's phenomenal. Her name is Casey, and she comes from my sort of side of the country, California. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, Casey.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate being here with you and diving in.
Yeah, right. It's, you know, I guess the first thing is that cancer is not a death sentence.
Oh, absolutely not. And even when you are diagnosed with stage 4, and I have issues with staging.
Yeah, right. Or what kind do you have? Well, I just have cancer. My cells are crazy. You know, it's like.
Right. You know, it's not a death sentence anymore. I know off the top of my head 5, 6 different women that are stage 4, but are no evidence of disease. So I think that the staging needs to change and maybe will with technology. But
Yeah,
we'll
because that's a perception.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely, cancer is not a death sentence anymore.
No. Don't you find it interesting? Let's just use that word. Don't you find it interesting that cancer has been around for decades and we've dropped billions of dollars on research, and for some mysterious reason, they still haven't figured it out. Don't you find that odd?
To some degree, cancer is a fickle beast. It loves to outsmart the best of us.
Yeah.
It mutates quite intelligently, if you will, for lack of a better word. And it's definitely something that we are surviving more of. Like I think as of this year, there's over 24 million survivors in the US alone. So it's definitely we're creating more survivors. However, a, a formative cure, I hope it's in my lifetime. I hope to see that, but I don't, there are no guarantees with anything.
I know. You know, I've had a few people on where we've had conversations about cancer, and someone that I know that is a PhD at Boston Medical College. His name is Dr. Thomas Seyfried. I recommend everybody check him out. He's been researching cancer for about 30 years. And what he's come up with is that it's actually not a genetic thing. It's more of a metabolic issue. Like the mitochondria of the cells have been, I don't know, like damaged or whatever word you want to use for it. And then they go rogue.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would agree with that because considering less than 7% of cancers are hereditary, where
thank
else
you
is
for
it coming
saying
from?
that. Say that one more time.
Less than 7% of cancers across the board is hereditary.
So why do they keep beating the drum of this hereditary research they have to do? Well, why don't they just pivot, I mean, to looking at what's really going on?
I don't know. I think it's complicated and I think they have to start somewhere. And I think because we have this static thing that doesn't really change that much, like DNA, I think that's where they're starting because they're like, okay, if we can figure out where it's coming from, why does it mutate from one generation to the other? Maybe there's a link. And therefore, if we can find the link, we can find the cure. However, they're not taking into consideration stress, lifestyle, environment, all of these other things that are,
And trauma,
yes, 100%.
trauma. So I'm a business consultant, and my company has been creating these, we call it the post-pandemic era, and they're programs for companies that are struggling along because everything has shifted. People's mindsets have changed. People don't want to work like they used to. It's all very, very different. And what inspires potential employees to come to your company is no longer what it once was. So, companies are being forced to really look at, okay, well, who are we really, and what are we offering? And in putting these programs together, one of them is how to inoculate against mental illness at work. And so in my research, one of the things I found is that mental health, trauma, shock, abuse is a precursor to quite a few major diseases, and cancer is one of them.
Yes, the data does not lie. The ACE Institute has been studying this for decades, and the data that they've accumulated, the consensus is that if you have had a childhood trauma, you are 78% likely to have a cancer diagnosis. If you've endured a trauma, about the time frame is about 2 years. 97% of all cancer diagnoses come from or direct correlation from that trauma, like it within about a 2-year range. And
Wow.
I am a product of a very traumatic childhood, so it
Yeah.
really honestly doesn't surprise me.
Wow, you're blowing my mind right now. I didn't know the percentages were that high.
Yes, and they are scary high, and that's just cancer, not to mention like chronic illness and disease that
Yeah.
it can also come from that.
Well, there's a lot to be said for um, our thinking and our perceptions of reality. Um, Fight, freeze, or flight. All of that is tremendously overwhelming to the cells. They can only, let's say you have a traumatic childhood and you've got this unresolved emotion or emotions, shock, and it's stored in the body. And then as you go through life, you have experiences that then will like trigger or push the button on those traumas and shock, and then boom, it's like they just happened. It's just like it's a brand new happening, and there you are. It's like now your cells are saying enough. I can't handle this anymore. I'm just like, you're putting way too much on me, and they go rogue.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is, but it isn't. Like if you think about it, like your immune system, like think about it like a car engine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to operate and function as best as it can, but it's still like if you never update the car, if you never change the
Yeah.
oil, the tires, the things, like it's going to break down at some point. So stress in our lives, emotional or actual stress, all creates this perfect storm for our immune system to dysfunction and dysregulate to
Yeah.
allow cells to grow.
I know. I know. That's the part that I think is just overwhelming for most people, because they don't. I mean, I used to own a gym. I owned a gym for 10 years. I did a lot of fitness coaching and trained professional athletes. And other than the actual professional athletes, the average person coming through the door wasn't really thinking about their immune system.
No.
They're just like, I'm here to get my workout in, and to tighten up my glutes and put some size on my biceps. And I'm out the door to go home and make dinner for my family. And so I feel like there's a disconnect in most human beings between who they're being in their internal self, like the relationship we have with ourselves, and then an awareness of how that impacts the immune system. I think there's a huge, well, it just even impacts the body at all, it's a huge disconnect.
I would agree with you completely. I would say prior to diagnosis, I was still white knuckling through life. Like, you know, because of what I went through as a child, impacted the decisions I made as a young adult,
Of
impacted,
course.
you know,
The
it just,
relationships you had, all of it, right?
yeah, the place I worked, everything, like it impacted every aspect of my life, those decisions. In hindsight, I have this
Yeah,
information. In real time, you don't know what you don't know.
I know. It's a blind spot. Well, and I agree with you. I think there's so much awareness now on food consumption, how much we eat, when we eat, how we eat it, how we're feeling about ourselves when we eat it. That was something that didn't exist, say, I don't know, 15 years ago, where you would have that awareness. And now, because I can remember as a child, we had a lot of trauma in our family. And I can remember as a kid, we'd be sitting down to meals, and everybody in the family was triggered. Everybody was pissed off about something, and there we are eating, and we're angry or we're sad or we're feeling rejected or whatever, and nobody talked. Like, you didn't talk, so none of that actually had an opportunity to be resolved. And I just feel like you said, the white knuckling, you go through life just like, I have to do this and I have to do it right, and it has to be perfect, or I'm not enough. And that all can be blind spots that, you're doing to yourself, and you don't even know you're doing it.
100%. Everything you just said was me prior to cancer.
Oh my God.
I never felt enough. I was trying to strive for this unattainable goal
Yeah.
that didn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was, I can relate to that. I've done that to myself in my life. And I think it's a way of compensating for, whatever happened back there, and not ever really getting to the root of it, and just having it sort of like percolate in the background, um, running our lives without even be aware that it's a program back there that's running the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild when you understand like because there's no history of cancer in my family. Like, so where did it come from? Especially something so rare and something that young adults don't get diagnosed with. I think there's that 1,500 people globally a year that get what I get in the age group that I was in, because I was 31 at the time. And so it just you ask why, but really, like, it wasn't a matter of why did this happen? It was a matter of, like, when was it going to happen and what type of cancer?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think the trigger was?
Honestly, I that's what I've tried to pinpoint. I don't really know what it was. I think I just was, like I had mentioned earlier, white knuckling through life, and finally, like, my body was like, "We can't do this anymore."
So it's like an accumulation of negative reinforcement. Yeah.
Yeah, and just constantly, second guessing myself, not having the ability to have a voice or live even like what I wanted to do. And, I kept striving for these goals. I was always stressed out. I was always anxious. I didn't know what even anxiety was prior to cancer. I
Right.
was
Because you were so there all the time. You didn't differentiate it.
right. I woke up like that, went to bed like that, didn't think anything else. Like, I was always on guard for something. What? I have no idea. I just I wasn't living a healthy life, even though I thought I was at my healthiest at the time, because I exercised.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that too. That was my band-aid. Um, and I think, always being on guard, I can relate to that as well. That comes from a childhood of trauma
mhm,
and
yeah,
shock, waiting, expecting something really major to crash next.
right.
And so your nervous system is always on red alert.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I call it redlining. It's like being in a sports car and you're constantly redlining the tachometer. It's like not cool. The engine
right.
will blow. The engine will blow. There you go.
Right. Back to the car reference, full
There's
circle.
another, yeah, I love that. We both like cars. Um, that's interesting. So during your time of just treatment and moving forward as a healthy person, did you do any sort of psychoanalysis? Did you have a therapist? How did you process some of these patterns, like always being on guard or revved up or
I did. So, I ended up about after and I was coming to the finish of my first time with cancer, and I was searching for a therapist. I wanted somebody who was specializing in cancer. Um, because of my age, it's like so random and rare. I wanted somebody who definitely knew what they were doing. And I remember the first time that we talked about childhood, and I shut the conversation down completely. I walked out. I was angry. I sent her a very scathing email.
woo?
She literally did not think I was coming back.
That's funny.
I
And
showed
you
up.
but you did.
Yeah, I showed up the next week and I was like, "I know I need help." And I'm like, literally, like, "I don't know where else to go. You are
Yeah.
my last great hope." Like, basically, is what I told her. And I said, "I'm not ready to talk about that yet." But then I relapsed a few more times, and so I didn't circle back to that conversation again until I was, done with, no, I wasn't done with treatment. I was coming, I was finishing my stem cell transplant, and I was outpatient, and I was in recovery, before my last diagnosis. And that's when I reached back out and I said, "Hey, I'm out of the hospital. I'd like to resume seeing you." And then I relapsed again. And so
Mm.
after that is when we really started to unpack everything
Yeah.
from like how I was coping to why it's from my childhood and how to change the internal conversation. And trust me, I think for about a year, every single time I left her office, I was streaming tears down my face. And she left me with so many things to contemplate and unpack in the meantime that like it was some of the hardest work that I have done, but I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that I did it.
And you see, what's interesting is that, because I've been coaching people for over 20 years on human performance, and most people will avoid at all costs digging into what's percolating in the background. I've had clients where they're constantly changing their subject, or they're bouncing around from thing to thing in our session, and it's all an avoidance strategy to not have to really look at the pain. I mean, who wants to do that? you know I did have someone say to me once, I was actually talking to a friend of mine that's a counselor, and I was saying, I've done so much work on myself, since I was in my late 20s. When I was in my late 20s, I discovered Louise Hay.
Mm,
Yeah, right. And she wrote a book, and it's called You Can Heal Your Life.
yep.
Well, let me tell you, when I read that book, my whole world went upside down. It was unbelievable. I was like, wow, there's a whole other way to live life besides the way I've been taught to live it. And everything just unraveled, unraveled completely. I read the book, tried to share it with my family. And, Louise Hay had cervical cancer, and she healed herself through, working on herself, changing her diet and all that. But for me, it was like I could never look back. In 3 months after I finished that book, in 3 months, I ended a 10-year relationship with a guy that I was then engaged to. I pulled my daughter out of school and moved across the country. Like, I couldn't get any further because I was at the ocean. And I sold my business.
Wow.
Yeah, and I changed my career, and I went to work in the radio industry for a few years while I kind of like figured out, okay, what am I going to do? But those are really massive steps. And I did them in a very, very short period of time. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never made a move like that before in my life. But it was the best thing for me because it got me into a different environment. I mean, let's face it, where I grew up, nobody reads Louise Hay. Nobody does affirmations. They thought I was off my rocker, like I needed a psychiatrist. I probably did, but yeah. And then I got moved, and I started meeting people that were just different. They were more in alignment with what I was learning through Science of Mind and Louise Hay, and just that whole change your thinking and you'll change your life,
Yeah. I call it's like a spiritual awakening where you finally realize like the default setting in my brain was broken.
Yes. And once you go through that spiritual awakening, there's no going back.
No, there isn't. Like once you know what you didn't know, you can't, it's like Pandora's box. You can't shut it. But
No.
I don't regret opening it and diving in one bit. I'm mentally, emotionally, physically, so much in a better place than I was. I don't even recognize who I was almost. It's very odd.
Yes, that's good. That's good. Do you find that by digging into, what's going on with you and you, that became more of your life than, say, charging after goals, or you know what I'm saying? Like the superficial stuff of life, like the materialism, and okay, I got this plaque, I got this accomplishment, I live in this zip code. Did you find that stuff just sort of lost its shine?
I mean, overall, yes. From time to time, there's like moments of like, oh, but you didn't do, it rears its head, and I have to go, I see you, I hear you, but that's not what we're doing anymore. And, you know, I, I don't, I want to make a massive impact on other people's lives, not achieve the gold star. I don't care if anybody ever knows what I
See,
do.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's
It
exactly
changed.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, money, we need money to live. Like, so it's not like that's not a piece of the equation, but it's not what I'm
It's
living
not
for.
the driver.
Yes, correct. Like I was trying to, check the boxes of life, house, car, family.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. It's like all those societal constructs that we've been told will make us happy, that, don't.
I agree. I agree completely. Like I thought those would make me happy, so I kept trying to achieve more of them when
Hmm.
it was just making me more miserable. I was like, "Why isn't this making me happy? Why
Right.
this should make me happy and it's not." Like, I don't get it. I was very confused. And it wasn't until I went through, my own awakening that I realized like none of that matters. And, this is a lesson that I should have learned very early on. My
Oh,
grandmother
don't say that.
well, my grandmother would always say to me, "Just be happy." Like all the money and stuff, that was never her thing. It was just be happy. And it was like, yes, grandma, but like I'm trying to do these things to find the happiness. And like what she was trying to say was like that doesn't actually matter. But I wasn't in a place to hear it
I
because
got you. I
that
got you. If you can't hear it, you keep on trucking, and you keep on doing what you're doing, and repeating the patterns, right?
yeah, 100%.
Well, and in all fairness, the way our society is constructed, that is what we are groomed from the time we're toddlers to believe is happiness.
Oh, absolutely. It is it's like the less than culture, like you don't have this, so obviously you can't be happy.
Yeah, or enough. You don't have this, so therefore you're not enough.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which is unfortunate because I probably have less things now than I've ever had in my life, and I'm happier than I've ever been, like I'm 8 minutes away from the ocean, and that brings me more joy in my day-to-day than any of this stuff that I have.
No, I hear you. So I'm curious, when all this started to go down and you're in your 30s, what were you doing for a career?
I was working in a very male-dominated industry, I was an international sales manager. My territory was Canada, Mexico, the US, and I was working probably 50 plus hours a week. I had a 2-hour daily commute in rush hour traffic.
Oh,
I was stressed out all the time.
I know what that's like. I lived 20 years in LA, and I got you 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never said no to anything at work. I didn't know that you could. So I was everything that they asked me to do, I said yes to. And so I basically was like living for the weekend. And on my weekends, I would binge drink basically and rinse and repeat every single week.
Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you've completely overhauled your life. This is incredible.
Yeah, I rarely drink, if at all. I have boundaries around work time. Um, I give myself permission to say no if something happens or I'm invited to something or yeah, it's wild.
Good for you. That's a transformation.
Mhm.
I think anybody watching should have a tremendous amount of just, inspiration that one can shift their life like you have. That's just really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a complete 180 from the way I used to live, and it's for the better. Like, I think, once you and this is, like, some of the stuff that I teach my clients is, like, it's what makes you happy, it's not what society wants you to do,
I
and I
know.
think you realized that a long time ago.
Yeah, I realized it, but the old program still pulled on me.
Mm,
I'm at a stage now where um, I've changed up my entire business model so that it's more focused on consulting companies and organizations, um, because that's fun to me. So it's like, okay, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it, you know?
yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
but that's amazing because you will get the yeses and the nos that are true to who you are and what you wanna do, and that's, you know, something to live by in and of itself.
Yes. Which is, it's really contrary to how I was programmed as a child. And I think that's part of it too, is the my grandparents and my parents came out of a time in history that was filled with wars,
Mm,
kind of like we're starting to experience now. And but it was way bigger and intense, and it wasn't a time where you talked about your feelings.
mm,
So, when you went through these like horrific experiences, like my dad was in the Air Force, and when he came home, I don't know, maybe he was when he was gone, it might have started, but when he came home, his coping mechanism was alcohol,
yeah.
you know. So that just caused this massive unraveling in our family, and nobody knew how to address it, much less deal with it. Like there was no one in our family that actually could say, God, this hurts,
Yeah.
you know, and let's just be nice to each other. Like that never existed. So what took place, what did exist was, okay, let's push harder, let's work longer. And we were farmers, so that was pretty easy to do. You could just
Mhm.
you work 24/7 on a farm and never get
Yep.
it all done.
Mhm.
And so, with that, then there was all of the denial of the emotions, the pain, the sadness, the grief, I don't know, whatever they were. So you just poured your energy into more work, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a environment where feelings were not talked about, and they were oftentimes by my mother gaslit of like, "You shouldn't feel that way." Like,
Oh,
"Okay." Like, how am I supposed to feel? Like, so I didn't even have an understanding of like that was wrong to raise someone like that. So I was like, "Okay, I'll shut them off."
yeah,
Like,
because you have no reference point, right?
right. And
Yeah,
you never know how truly messed up it is until you go out in the world and you're like, "Wait a minute, you weren't raised like that?"
I know. Do you remember the movie something, the Ya Ya Sisterhood?
I do, but I haven't seen that in decades. I
Right.
barely
It's
remember
almost,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's two, and I sometimes I get them confused. There was the traveling pants. Remember the traveling
Mhm.
pants? That, but that's a different movie.
Right.
It was this Yaya Sisterhood, and I think Ellen Bernstein was in it, and Sandra Bullock.
Mhm.
Trying to think who else was in it, but I mean, I went to the screening of that. Actually, I went to the opening night. A friend of mine worked at MGM, and so we went to the opening night. I watched the movie. I was sitting beside her, and I was like sobbing the whole movie. You know, I was just so triggered, and nobody knew. I mean, I was just like doing my thing until the end of the movie, and she was like, "Wow, that was amazing." And then she said, "You know, I can't believe that people actually had families like that." That's what she said. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's why I'm sitting here crying, because that was my family."
Right.
You know, so these kinds of things just present themselves. I think it was like a gift, like it was an opportunity for me to, you know, really draw some parallels between what I walked away from and the shift that I made, and then what I was creating as a result of, you know, living this new paradigm. And it has not been easy. I work at it every single day. And that's what's fascinating to me about how the coaching world is blown up. And you see these videos, you know, do this and you'll be rich in 24 hours, or think this and, you know, your whole life will change by tomorrow. And I'm just like, what are you people talking about? You know, like literally, what are you talking about? It's a false narrative. What we should be saying to people is, you're going to work on yourself till the day you kick the bucket,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you're just going to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, it is transformation over a lifetime. You know, it's continually working on yourself. And I always describe it as like it's an onion. I peeled back a lot of the layers, but like now I'm at a different layer and it's like, oof. I thought the
Yeah,
first ones were hard, but this is just as hard.
yeah, yeah. I know. I know. It's a process. It's a day-to-day process, and all the expensive luxury stuff in the world won't cover it up. You know, if you really want to get to know yourself, you just have to do the work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how important you are, what your title is, how much money you have or don't have. The work is the work,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. It all leads to living the most authentic life that you can live for who you are, not for anybody else. And it's really hard for people to understand that it's not a quick fix, it's not a
Right.
band-aid, you
Well,
know?
yeah. I mean, I've had clients come through courses that I teach, and this has been fascinating. It's why this is one of the reasons I stopped taking private clients, because they would move along, grow, 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 and then the big stuff would start to come up,
Mm.
and they're like, "I don't want to deal with that. Why are you making me do this?" You know, is yeah. So bless you. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just became too stressful. It's like, oh my God, really? What'd you think we were going to do?
right? Like, a change can only happen when you allow yourself to actually reprogram the default setting and nothing changes. I mean, temporarily it might change, but it's not going to, you're going to fall back into the same pattern eventually.
Yeah, because you might have run that pattern for 30 years or 40 years. And now you're like, okay, I've done this little exercise. I read the book. I'm journaling like you told me so. Why won't it go away?
Right. Why don't I feel better?
I know. It's crazy. So dis-ease, huh? Whatever label you put on it, it's a lack of ease between our higher self, I think, and our ego. I don't know how to put that into words, but it's definitely a disconnect. Do you find it easier now to stay connected to yourself?
Yes, 100%. But I've continued to, again, do the work. Like, it's still very easy for me to fall back into the Casey of old and these patterns that are just so deeply ingrained, and I have to like literally shut it down and say, like, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
Like, you can go to the beach in the middle of the day if you have time in your schedule. Like, why do you have to keep working? There are no rules. You work for yourself. Like, and if I choose to work on the weekend, I can. Like, it's just like, it's such like the hard conversation to continually have with yourself into not falling back into that same old pattern.
Yep. And I think that's a great ending point, is do not let yourself fall back into that old pattern. So you have to become aware of what the pattern is in order not to fall back into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's becoming more self-aware.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think we came full circle. So how do people reach you?
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook at The Happier Hustle. And I love having conversations with people about, just helping them with anything, giving them hope that life gets better.
Oh, that's awesome. And so I know you have a free download. We'll have that in the show notes. Any parting thoughts for the viewers?
That even when on paper and everything tells you that things are grim and not looking as they should, to not lose hope that, because by all medical science, I should be dead and I'm somehow not. So never lose hope. It's the most powerful drug you can have.
Yeah, mine's a powerful, powerful tool, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for being here today. I know this has been quite the conversation. It's probably the most heartfelt conversation I've had with any guest. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, I appreciate being here too. So thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to come on and share my story.
Yeah. And congratulations on just shifting, making the choice and then following through.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wow. Okay, everybody. So now you know that it all starts from within, right? As a man thinketh, and take care of your mind, and your mind will take care of your body. And thank you so much for being here today. I'm just absolutely so grateful. Please do like, share, comment. That makes a massive difference in how the algorithm picks up my show and gets it out to more people. So thank you for that. And I do have a retreat, a leadership retreat coming up in Newport Beach on the 7th of December. So reach out to me if you'd like to come. I've got a few seats left. And I will see you all very, very soon. And remember, stay aligned, stay alert, and stay awake.